Good morning, good evening, everybody. Boy, it's been a long day. Uh, Date, May 15th, 2024. This is the meeting of the Master Plan Committee. Meeting will be held at the Municipal Building Training Room, 3rd floor, 355 East Central Street, 6:30 PM. Note to residents, all citizens are welcome to attend public board and committee meetings in person. The meetings will also be live streamed by Franklin TV, and recordings of meetings are available on Franklin TV's Franklin Town Hall TV YouTube channel. And additionally, in an effort to maximize citizen engagement opportunities, citizens will be able to continue to participate remotely via phone or Zoom. Link to access tonight's meeting is listed on the agenda, or you can call in by phone number. That's 1-929-205-6099, and enter the meeting ID 840-9320-1253, and then press pound. So once again, that call-in number is 1-929-205-6099. Enter the meeting ID 840-9320-1253, and then press pound. All right, I think everyone who's coming in on Zoom is in. So do I have chairs? Looks like I'm missing just one. That's Meg. So I think I'll go around the room. First thing on our agenda tonight, good evening, by the way, everybody. How's everyone doing again?
Good.
Fantastic. Boy, that was a quick week, right? Just went like that. Bing, bang, boom.
Sure was.
And right back at it again. So first thing on my list is the subcommittee reports. Janelle, over to you first. So land use and zoning.
All right, we had a great meeting this past Monday, the 13th, and we feel like we have a good list of goals and objectives to review with everybody. They've gotten updated into our shared doc. So hopefully, I don't know if others were able to see them, but we're ready to talk about them.
Yeah, it's exciting. I saw that. I saw those were posted. Thank you for all that hard work. And thank you to your group, your team. It's a wonderful team over there.
It's a good team.
So I know there's a lot to talk about. I know Amy was mentioned a few things. We'll talk about that when we get to our discussion. Second on subcommittee reports, Ken, Housing and Economic Development.
We got our goals in. Thanks, Amy, for helping us get those in there. And next meeting is the 29th of May, 5:15.
29th.
29th of May, 5:15 p.m. right here, second floor, Town Hall.
15. Perfect. Kobe, Community Services, Facilities and Circulation.
Yes, CSFC just met before this, where we, so I apologize for being the last group to add our goals and objectives to the group, but did get those in today, and then we revisited them and added, we're adding Meg.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we revisited them. We still have like a lot of workshopping, but we were able to get to just about everything and get some agreement on direction. So then it's really just about, workshopping the actual specific language, as well as calling out for ourselves where there's potential overlap with other groups, and hopefully going to make that a more productive contribution to today's conversation.
Perfect. Thank you, Kobe. I see Meg's come online. Meg, update from the Open Space, Recreation, Natural, Cultural, Historic Resources Subcommittee.
Yeah, so we met last night just to go over our goals and objectives with any updated information we had from public input, and finalize those goals and objectives with just a couple tweaks from what we had previously submitted. And I did send Amy an email last night just letting her know that we had made a couple little changes. We don't have our next meeting on the agenda yet, but we will get that up soon.
Okay, perfect. So, a couple of quick things. Anything else from subcommittee chairs? Okay. So before I go on to line item 2 on our agenda for tonight, which is subcommittee's discussions on cross-element goals and objectives, it's kind of a continuation from last week's discussion. Wanted to bring up an interesting point that Amy and I had been discussing prior to meeting starting. Amy, you want to inform the chairs your thoughts on having staff members from specific departments come and visit them?
Sure. No. What we did today as part of staff is that
I took the spreadsheet that had each other individual spreadsheets, combined them, kind of read through them. I don't have a complete list of the overlapping, although some people made points, which was really appreciative, that where you kind of point out you're probably overlapping with another thing. There wasn't, with the overlaps, it was, no one had the same exact language, but they really had the same purpose and the same goal of what they wanted to achieve. It just wasn't written all in the same language. I think before going into a public hearing, it's worth to pull in, you know, a department head or a staff person just to run through your goals and objectives. Like, this document's great. You guys did a great job with it. There's a couple things, like, you know, I'm land use and zoning, so there's a couple things that are kind of in the works already. And there's great points there as well. But as well as, like, with each department, they should just kind of consult back with, like, even open space. And they might have, I know you guys had a lot of them come in previous to creating these goals and objectives, just to make sure that we're still on the same wave with what staff was thinking. And it's not, it's just kind of like a yay or nay, or yeah, let's keep it and let's discuss and let's bring it to a public hearing, or you know, to our points and get the feedback. So it's just a little bit of that. And I don't see major changes. I think it's just more of the communication to, now that this is all put together, it should be a quicker meeting. You guys have done a great job, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
I know on open space, recreation, historical resources, we did have Rico I kind of chime in early on in the
Yeah.
process, but it would be keen to kind of circle back and maybe have her visit us one last time, just to see her thoughts on what we've come up with specifically to open space. I know many of the open space things have already been ironed out, but who would you suggest for land use and zoning?
I mean, I could definitely go. I can. Yes, we know that open space is Brico I. I go down the list of people, and Brian can help me out. I think that so we got open space, then we move on natural resources. Lot. Keep going. Economic development is myself and Brian. Housing is myself and Brian.
I'll have Maxine look at it.
And Maxine, yeah, we'll work with Maxine as well.
Okay.
Sustainability. We have to talk about different areas of that, cause obviously that's a combination of anywhere from facilities to DPW to town administration to.
Land use, it's crosses over everything.
Yeah, it crosses over everything, so that one we'll have to work
Would-
through.
I know this sounds like an interesting suggestion, but would the town administrator be somebody who'd maybe take a look at those goals? Community service facilities,
I mean, I think that,
circulation, or do we wanna have our facilities director?
it could be both. It definitely could be both, of taking a look at that, cause some of the more, things that are involved, I have to see if that's part of the town administration, if it's in the budgets, if it's a plan or a future for that. So that's a little bit hard for me to determine.
I mean, as is, we're already reaching out, you know, where it's easy, when there's just like a clear, quick question. Like, we just had a question about like library regionalization, and I just shot a note to the library director, CC Jamie, got a response from both, and answered that question. So some might not need like full meetings, but I think certainly everything that we're talking about in community services facilities, Jamie will have an opinion on.
Yeah, you will. So would you find it keen to invite him to one meeting prior to your next set, whatever your next meeting may be?
Yeah,
Or
I think
whenever
that's,
you feel most comfortable?
I think that's
prior.
possible. I might, you know, I wanna be sensitive to his time. I might shoot him in writing and,
Mhm.
and say that we'd love for him to come if possible. But if he can respond in writing,
Yeah, it's not like he's busy with the budget or
yeah,
anything. Okay, yeah, that would be good, I think that would be a good suggestion to have town administrator, sitting with you guys. Now, so Amy, you were saying
And then-
yourselves and Brian for housing, economic development,
And land use.
and land use,
Mm-hmm.
okay? But no real suggestions for sustainability.
I think I'm gonna have to spend a little bit more time kind of picking through the goals. I almost pull that one out and look through, and actually, as Colby just said, if it's just a simple email, we could go that direction. If some of it's a little bit more involved with a certain department or area in town, maybe we need to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, as I'm sitting here looking at the list that they've got populated here, I see quite a few objectives. I think these are really just kind of thrown in here. There's a few of these that are not filled in quite yet. But a lot of the sustainability things listed here look like they're building related.
Yeah.
Everything from EVs to solar
Yeah.
panels to converting the HVAC systems to
Yeah, there's-
renewables.
Facilities,
yeah.
DPW, they're gonna wanna have at least, you know, input on some things, so. I
Maybe-
think Amy's right, I think we could even have an email to 10 different people on staff.
Yep.
You know, these are some sustainability preliminary draft goals that are being discussed. What are your thoughts? Get back to me in a week, you know.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
I was
Yeah, give
wondering,
'em-
it doesn't have to be a meeting, right? It
No.
could just be like,
Right.
Eric?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say the same thing, really. Well, first, I'd say Sustainability Committee did meet with a number of the department heads, and Councilor Hamlin can add into it, but I think there was a large agreement with the direction and the spirit of where we were going. So I hope none of our ideas here come as a surprise to them. I do really like the idea of having department heads included into this review process to get their input, because the last thing we would want is to have some sort of surprise from them when we go out to the public, so I think that's a good idea. I just think we need to do it as efficiently as possible. And so I like the idea of sending the documents out to the heads, having them have a chance to review those documents, and I may even suggest that rather than having multiple subcommittees have separate meetings, maybe we just have one meeting of the committee here with the department heads that they wanna, and they have plenty of time in advance, so that at that meeting, we don't need to go line by line, because if there's agreement and there's general direction of it, we're good. We can go with it as is. But then they'll at least know which ones we need to highlight where greater dialogue needs to happen between the committee as well as the heads.
I think we spoke about the 29th, didn't we, Amy? At some point,
was that the
somehow, some way fitting in.
Yeah, that was going to be the public hearing that we were talking about moving to
Right.
June.
So just so everyone in the room and everyone on Zoom understands, we had discussion prior meeting about moving out the hearing to June. Amy and I were discussing earlier, Brian, that it looks probably the most feasible date would be the 15th of June. I'm sorry, the 12th of June.
Well,
That's so that's roughly 2 weeks into May, and that should give us enough time to get the department heads kind of into the circle. But if we wanted to have a meeting on the 29th, we could put it on the agenda and invite the department heads, or the relevant department heads in to kind of discuss the goals, because we do need to kind of review these goals holistically speaking, because as you pointed out earlier, we need to eventually vote on all of these individual goals and objectives at one meeting, which that date would probably be the 26th following the public draft. So does that sound reasonable? Do we want? Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so I think that's a great thing. I think between now in the May 26th meeting, that if the committees can reach out and if you can just CC me, so I know what the questions are, and then if there's any unanswered questions, we could at least ask department heads to attend, to further discuss if there's anything.
Prior to the 26th on us voting on
29th.
anything?
No,
Or
I'm
the
sorry.
29th?
Yes,
29th.
of May.
Okay, I wanna get a
Yeah.
collective agreement from the committee on putting another date on our agenda to meet. Is everyone in agreement with that?
Yeah, I already have it, I still have it on my agenda,
Yeah.
on my schedule.
I don't think we took a formal vote on adding a date into our agenda.
I think, yeah, I agree with your dates except for, I think, June 26th, we were scheduled, but I think there's a town council meeting that night,
On the 29th?
22nd, June.
Oh.
I thought he
Well, I
said June
think-
15th.
Well, June 15th, June 12th
Would be
is
the
the
public
public
hearing.
hearing. The 26th would be, so you think there's a town council meeting the 26th of?
I have it labeled as both right now.
Yeah, we had master plan committee plan that night, but I think you guys have a town council meeting.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
There's nothing on the 19th. but
So
that's
a little
federal
bit more to
holiday.
kind of plan would be in
Juneteenth.
July.
Maybe we should just email them all a link to the spreadsheet and say, have a look at this. If you have any questions,
But my concern is I don't want them to get confused with other subcommittees. So I'd rather only give the department heads what pertains to them, so they can focus on those goals and
Yeah,
objectives.
We've done this many times where, we don't need DPW's input on every single one of these, so we
Yeah.
just, give them the 10 things that we're concerned about, throw it out to them, and hopefully they'll
Mhm.
respond. If you give them the
Okay.
whole thing, they're not gonna respond.
Mhm.
It's just not gonna come back.
Okay.
quickly, That's for sure.
So, that's fine, I don't have an objection with just sending that out to them and getting their feedback. And then we can ultimately review their feedback and make any further changes necessary prior to the public hearing on the 12th. If we wanna just nix that meeting on the 29th altogether.
Mhm.
And for clarity, it's May 29th,
It's
correct?
June 29th of this month.
No, May.
June
Sure.
26th, May 29th.
Yeah.
I thought we were talking about having a meeting this month.
So what we'd like to do by May 29th is have some feedback
Right.
from the staff on the goals and objectives.
Yes,
Before going into the June 12th.
but we don't necessarily need a meeting on the 29th to review them. Would you not?
Can I ask, related to this, if Amy and Brian, it makes sense to meet with housing, economic development, and land use and zoning? If we all met together, because there's so many overlaps, then we make a quorum of the whole committee, so maybe we should just have a meeting on the 29th, and that's the agenda.
And just have,
Yeah, and I was actually gonna say, even if you wanna meet before that with land use, I don't know if there's enough time between now and then, and if you have another land use meeting, and I can attend and Brian can attend, or one of us can.
Yeah, we don't have another land use one on the books. I was looking
Okay.
at that week of the 29th, but wanting to know if the 29th was on or off
Mhm.
before we were filling that week with things,
Okay, Monday's Memorial Day.
right?
oh, right.
Oh.
Thanks, that is a busy week. Thanks, Mel, for pointing that
I
out.
mean, I could, as far as land use, housing, and economic development, I think some of that from what is in the document, I could provide an email directly to your committee of the few things that pop out
Okay.
that might need to be changed, like that I could just, if we're talking about emails, I could just send it to you and just give you an update on a few of the things that pop out. I think a lot of the other things, I don't think a huge issue I see with them, but there is some stuff, I think there'll be discussion items, and then there'll be items that apply and maybe not apply. Is we could start with that, and then that could be the conversation piece for May 29th.
Hmm.
So I think some of it we can resolve through email, and some of it we can resolve on the 29th, if that works.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess if you're reading through all of it, you can identify what's a discussion item or not,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, through the chair, I think it's important to have both. I think,
Yeah.
you know, to the extent that it can be done in writing, great, but, you know, and oftentimes in these situations, there's miscommunications, the communication medium via writing isn't as rich, and so having an opportunity to have an open dialogue is great. And so we invite all the in my opinion, I think the most efficient way is we send out the list, and we can send it tiered, and each chair, maybe in Gino's absence, you know, either Councilor Hamlin or I can send it out, you know, and then we let them know that they can share their input to us, and if we wanna have a dialogue with us, it's on May 29th, and we go from there.
Okay. So, with that being said, I do agree with you, Eric, and I do agree with you, Janelle. Since we don't have May 29th, Wednesday, May 29th, as an official calendar date, I would like to put that to a vote for the whole committee to approve.
I move to add an additional day of May 29th to the master plan update subcommittee's agenda for discussion with department heads on the draft goals and objectives.
6:30?
It's 6:30 p.m. Eastern Central Time.
I was just like, what time?
I work
That's all.
across the net multiple time zones, so, you know.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Meg,
Yes.
Janelle,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Erin,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Clerk, yes, Vice Chair,
Yes.
Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
904 absent.
4 absent. So we have a new date added to our agendas for May 29th to have review goals and objectives with each department head relative to what their input is. We're still gonna send out, go ahead, Amy.
One question. Sorry, looking at Kobe. When are you gonna have your goals and objectives posted?
Oh, they're there?
They're not in there.
What? Am I, did I
They're
put
not
them
on this
to
list.
the wrong?
Well, they're not
Well,
on the
they're
written
on
list,
that
but I
one,
think.
But no, are they in the drive? Did they go in today? Cause they weren't in today.
Combined subcommittees, master plan goals and objectives?
They're not in there. But the other spreadsheet that's not combined, they're not there. But the original one that,
You don't want them here, you want them somewhere else?
you can put them in the other drive, not combine them, it doesn't matter either way.
They're
You
here.
can do either one, they're not in there, and they
That's
weren't in the
circulation.
They're
original.
looking,
That's
we're looking at them
circulation.
right now,
There.
so.
Oh, okay.
That's
Oh, you did
circulation.
that today?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, my apologies.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's got
Alright,
them,
great.
he's got them in the
Perfect.
combined
Perfect.
list. He
Thank you,
doesn't-
But I
Kobe.
can move them elsewhere.
Nope, that's fine.
Yeah, cause here's
That's fine.
here's the other.
Okay,
Where is it?
Yeah.
perfect.
Just have-
Thank you, Kobe.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
So this was the other working one that we had. This is where
Mm-hmm.
Janelle put in, Megan put in, sustainability's in here, open space. This is the,
Okay. Yeah.
Yep,
The summary.
sorry about that.
the one was the combined one, this one right here.
Mm-hmm.
Could I ask
Cool.
a question about the
It says
June
combined
12th
subcommittee.
public hearing? Is that to start at 7?
They can do 6:30.
I'm just putting it back into my calendar.
Do you see it?
I don't,
Hold on, it should be, go to your drive for a second.
6:30 would be good. Let's put it at 6:30.
Nope, go to drive. There we go. There it is, combined subcommittees. Yep, perfect. Okay. So we're clear on the date, we're we're clear on what the goals and objectives are for the 29th. So everyone's good. We don't really need a vote for this because this is just changing. We already have the date. This is just to clarify with the committee as a whole that we're gonna move the public hearing and our results to June 12th. That's Wednesday, June 12th, 6:30. Same bad time, same bad place. Where did I just have my calendar up here?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So that May 29th meeting at 5:15 of the
Yes.
housing, I think that'd be redundant, so I am going to not do that.
Well, you're still going to review your goals and objectives with the subcommittee, and then this is gonna be able to sit down with the.
Minutes before we meet. Yes, that's my point, is that it's, I'll look for another time that we can get
Okay.
you two of you to get, I mean, we could do it before then if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
we'll
we're
keep it.
available.
All right, we'll keep it.
Yes.
All right.
You wanna meet
So-
before?
So what date and time? Just
May 29th, 5:15.
5:15?
Okay.
Yes, and in fact,
We might reach out prior to
Before,
that,
right.
Ken, and so
Speaking to it.
get the discussion moving a little bit ahead of time and,
Good,
yeah.
thank you.
perfect. All right, with that, I see, by the way, I really, really want to thank everybody for all of the hard work into correlating this into the spreadsheet. You know, I'm assuming, I didn't get confirmation, but this was Janelle, you inputted all of yours?
Not in the combined,
Okay, but yours under the spreadsheet,
under
Yeah.
the tabbed one.
very
Yeah.
nice.
Yes, we took everyone's tab
Mhm.
and combined it.
Yeah.
That's what we did
And-
today. Oh, the pictures didn't make it, sorry.
That's okay.
That was the only thing that didn't make it into the combined. The pictures didn't make it, but we took everything that we had in the individual ones into the combined.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the pictures, I'm like, hey, that's super cool.
We had, because we
Oh.
met virtually, we were sharing screens and just screenshotting the things that we were talking about and drop them in.
Nice, nice work. And I know Meg inputted everything for natural, cultural, historical, and open space. Thank you for all that hard work. I'm assuming Gino did the sustainability. Thank you for that. And Kobe, great job on putting your stuff in. That's much appreciated. And Ken, thank you for getting that information to Amy, who I know got that up in on your behalf. So great job, everybody, on getting that together. Okay, next steps. What's our next step? Basically, looking for, we still had any open overlapping questions between the subcommittee chairs that we'd like to get ironed out tonight. Amy? You had nodding your head.
I don't actually have a complete list right now.
Okay.
Cause I kinda spent today reviewing it. I'm gonna have to spend a little more time, kinda as I said that, there's overlapping, but nothing's written the same way. So it's kind of, I'm gonna have to pull out, what I'm hoping to do is kinda go through the spreadsheet, create a separate spreadsheet and put them next to each other. So you each review how one was said and how the other committee said it. And then, decide on what the right wording would be for that goal or objective. So I need a little bit more time on that.
Okay.
But, since now we have everything, I'll have it definitely by the 29th.
Excellent. So it's just, I mean, does anyone have any specific questions that they are just burning to try to get answered tonight? Because what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's just still some homework to do on getting these goals kind of cleaned up, compiled, reviewed, and ultimately directed towards the correct departments so that we can come back on the 29th and review any of those goals and objectives with the department heads. That's kind of our next steps. Am I missing something here?
As in, are you proposing that? We're all here, and I think that there's a lot that we need to work through.
Absolutely.
So if you're asking for like some topics to get us started.
Yes.
On that.
Then
So,
go ahead. Go ahead, Kobe.
Okay, in no particular order, want to start with parking again. Okay, open space and recreation group. How much discussion do you have of pathways between subdivisions, residential areas, pathways to key resources in key areas, sort of off-road pathways? That's something that was in circulation, but was flagged as possibly being dealt with in your group.
Yeah, so Kobe, our goal 3 is to provide opportunities for inclusive and accessible, passive and active recreation to meet the community's evolving needs. And that includes an objective to increase connectivity between, to and between Franklin's recreation areas, conservation areas, and open spaces by creating corridors for wildlife and recreational use. I don't know if that's wording sufficient for what you're looking for, with a little bit more of connectivity of the neighborhoods. It's certainly the intent to then allow access to the open spaces in between, through the neighborhoods.
Okay, that's helpful. So specifically toward access to recreation and conservation, not cut-throughs for the sake of, pedestrian pathways between subdivisions just for the sake of connecting subdivisions.
Correct. But in turn, looking at where most of those things would be, those connections are going to allow the connectivity between the open spaces. So I think the intent is the same.
Okay.
Maybe it's just, editing wording, whether it be on your end or probably on our end, to be a little bit more inclusive of that too.
Yeah, I think it's okay to maintain them separately, but knowing that, that we should flag whether, like Maple Hill will kind of come up as both, and just making sure that we're consistent there. But I think we will be fairly easily. But I think that we're going to identify some opportunities for like specific pedestrian pathways, not for the sake of conservation and recreation, but for the sake of walkability.
I think
Connectivity.
I think if you look at your map, right, and you look at the Franklin Greenway interconnected trail network, kind of trying to connect all the open spaces, that's more along the lines of what we're talking about, what the open space group is talking about. But your priority walk bike is really important too, because it gets people to the open spaces and with a different mode of transportation. So
but like,
they're both important.
But like, even looking at Daisy can connect through to Dover Circle, which can connect through to Bridle Path, which can connect to Maple Hill. So I think similar concept.
Yep.
Ken?
And to add to that, if you look at Housing Goal 2, Housing Goal 2, Objective 2.1, when it talks about infrastructure development, talks a little bit about that same sort of thing. Roads for certainly wayfinding and getting back and forth to places, cycling, everything else. And then under economic development, it's more about the downtown and connecting there. But there is in Goal 3 of economic development, Objective 3.1 also talks about that. Different purposes, but fits into that overall mindset.
I got you.
Through the chair, there's a nuance that I've been thinking about on this too, and it's not necessarily the connectivity between neighborhoods or the connectivity between existing resources, but it's the accessibility to our I'll call pocket parks. There's already existing resources that are there that may not have great access to, and looking to create, just to give an example, State Forest, that's right off of South Street. There's no parking that's available there. It's state forest, it's public land. Is there ways to increase connectivity in the neighborhoods that are off of South Street to easily access an undeveloped area that doesn't have any sort of walking trails to date, but could? And I think that's just an example where it's not that connectivity element, it's just increasing the accessibility into our existing resources. Yeah.
If I may add to that, Eric, I love the point that you raised and the word you use, accessibility. Not just accessibility from that standpoint, but also for disability access as well. I in looking over and reflecting on the goals that we put in for economic development and housing, I feel like there's a dearth of really calling out the ability for people who are differently able to move through these places, get to these places, and also have access to them as well. And especially if we're talking about aging populations and all that sort of stuff, you need different ways to get into those spaces.
Yeah,
We shouldn't assume it, I guess.
completely
Right.
agree, completely agree. And so I think our words matter on how we're sharing this to make sure that it is done in as inclusive a process as possible.
Yeah.
And I think it really dovetails well into those community resources, because the idea here is that no matter where you live in town, you don't have to drive somewhere if you want to go for a walk in the woods. You know, and the value that that brings to our community, to have that accessibility to our natural resources, would be a great thing to strive towards.
Yeah, Eric, thanks for the added sort of wording around that too, because we do have our objective 3.3, which is under our same, goal that we were just speaking of, but it was to improve access and to ensure the availability of sufficient off-street parking. So I've now just added that as sufficient and accessible off-street parking for Franklin's water resources and all hiking, biking, and walking trails, which I think will then, as additional trails evolve, that will be then included in that over the next 10 years.
Great, thank you.
That's good. You still have the floor? Any further
Okay.
questions?
Got another one for you, unless did you have a thought on
I-
that?
I just had a thought that I think this exercise feels really good because it's not even so much of what questions people have for each other, but just highlighting that there are overlaps, and are these overlaps places that they're nuanced enough that we want them to live in both places, but we just want to make sure that they're consistent and not contradictory.
Right.
Or does it make more sense for it to really live in one zone, but maybe we have a cross-reference, like in the goal, for more about this, see this section of the master plan, right? There might be a couple situations where we do that, but that's why I think we've been wanting to get to this point, and it's exciting.
All right, another one for you.
Go ahead. This is why we're having a meeting.
Okay, one of the things that we're talking about that circulation is looking at is just how far behind we are in our roadway and infrastructure maintenance, and we continue to accept new public roadways, which are only going to put us further behind. And so one of our big swing ideas would be to have no newly constructed public roadways, obviously with some limited exception. This overlaps with land use and zoning, and would be interested in how you, as well as maybe economic development in terms of new growth. Okay, I would be calling this, I just sort of rewrote it. It was 3.5 A and B. It's not well written.
No, it's
Please-
okay.
Please don't care about our wording right now.
3.8. Okay, so 3.5.
But yeah, the idea of no new public roadways, and so any new subdivision would have to be a private roadway.
I gotcha. Another addition of roadways into public maintenance, like, maybe?
If I get, only from what I've learned, I don't wanna speak for the DPW or a town engineer. What the process has been is once a couple houses have been developed, even though if it wasn't accepted, they've maintained the roads just for snow plowing, for safety, not as far as detention basins and all that. The roadways that are currently being accepted are old ones.
Yep.
We don't have a lot of new subdivisions right now in front of us. There's not a lot at all. And any multifamily developments are private, so we're not maintaining any of their roadways. So I guess just a little bit more clarification.
Yeah, I should clarify.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is referring to the possible construction of new subdivisions. And we broke this out. We do want to have a process for a better identifying whether it makes sense to accept an existing, like currently today, the roadway exists, but it's not in a public roadway. Should we accept that and have a policy around that? But this is specifically referring to any new subdivisions, be they industrial parks or residential subdivisions, that the default in almost all cases would be that they are permanently private roadways from now until forever.
Hold on one second. Ken, you have something? Go ahead. Amy?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I mean, I really can't answer that question. I think that's towards DPW and the town engineer, so.
We spoke with the town engineer.
Yeah. Maybe that's something you can reach out before defining.
Yeah, we did already.
Oh, you did?
Well,
Yeah, but obviously
Did
we
you
would
get a
revisit.
response?
Yeah. We had them in a meeting and talked about the roadway acceptance policies.
So I think the next step with that would be how that gets implemented.
Of course, yeah. Right now, it's just, I'm more throwing it
But,
out for
yeah,
like,
c-
do
could-
people
Yeah.
agree?
Councilor
Yeah.
Frangillo
Yeah,
was just
fine.
asking if any of us ever talked about it in our subgroups
Yeah.
before, right? And that's not anything that we talked about in
No.
sustainability,
Yeah.
nothing, I don't
I
remember
think
us in
it's-
open space talking about
It
it.
hasn't come under historical resources.
Yeah.
It's
Complicated.
I would think
It's
it might come under
complicated.
these,
Land
under
use,
the land
obviously.
use.
Yeah,
It's definitely
so
land use and zoning.
We've talked about it.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Ken, you had a comment you wanted to make about it?
Yeah, question. It hasn't come up in any of our discussions either, but I'm just trying to get a sense of what's the goal.
The goal is to not add further infrastructure liabilities to
It
the
adds more
town
expense.
finances, and instead to more efficiently use existing, not dig a deeper hole in our financial statement.
Ken?
Through the chair, is that add financial resources to the town?
It adds financial expense to the town because that
Sure.
anytime that we accept roads, we accept all the maintenance. That includes above and below the road, which, as Kobe's said so eloquently.
And through the chair, is there any thought about?
It's not cheap.
Yeah, it's not cheap, I know, but, we talk a lot about trying to make sure we support things like small businesses, we support affordable and other kinds of housing diversity, and the cost is gonna go somewhere, and those are the kinds of things that bring up the cost for those kinds of diversity elements in housing and also for small businesses. So just one of those things to keep in mind, and I think that's probably why in the committees I'm on, or the committee I'm on, that, I don't know, I think that's up for discussion, the consequence of that.
I agree, there's always a consequence. Janelle?
We've talked about it on both the circulation subcommittee that I'm on with Councilor Frangillo and the land use committee, as a question of should the acceptance policy be strengthened? What are our review criteria? Because if I recall our conversation with the town engineer, it was basically, well, we start maintaining it and then we just accept it. And that feels like a city the size of Franklin should have a policy around what we're expecting in the roadways and what the process is for accepting them. So that's as far as we've talked about it, and then I think on the land use committee, we thought, should this live in circulation or not, and then it didn't land in our list, but I even said, well, let's just flag it as an overlap, and we can talk about it as a group.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, the weighing the pros and cons of it, and I think that just because it overlaps with 3, that's why I bring it up today, and open to other thoughts. So yeah, weighing the pros and cons. I think you correctly identified the cons. The cons would be that new housing projects and retail projects, by internalizing the expenses on whoever is on that subdivision, that raises the cost of the property, and you have to make enough to pay for that private roadway. Those are gonna be large, expensive houses and things like that. My contention and sort of pushback on that would be, A, we can't blindly go into just accepting more infrastructure, and B, there is ample opportunity to construct housing and retail on existing infrastructure without the need for further build out. And so if you are choosing to build out, then that should not be on the backs of taxpayers that won't be able to maintain it.
Joe?
I think there'd be a lot more implications involved. I would believe that a home in a neighborhood that has to pay for their own trash service, because the town trash doesn't pick it up, they're responsible for their own maintenance, snow plow and everything.
Yeah.
that house is gonna be less valued than the one that has all the full services. So now you're losing tax revenue.
Yeah.
And a question to Brian is, would those developments have to be built according to Franklin standards if it's not gonna be an accepted road? So now we get less flow.
Actually, that's one of the notes I have. I was thinking that, first of all, you're dealing with, state laws.
Yeah.
You're dealing with subdivision regulations. The planning board has their own subdivision,
Yeah.
bylaw. They're the one, and this is where the, road, property subdivision and road construction and all of those things go through. It's great if you're gonna get a developer in that's gonna make everything private, and the people that live in that area pay for everything. That's condominiums and things of
Right.
that nature, right?
Yeah.
So that's worked right into that scenario. But when you're doing an actual subdivision with single-family parcels, or whatever the case may be, in an area like that, our subdivision regulations would have to be changed substantially, and I don't even know if
Yeah.
we could make the total changes to make that happen, but, I mean, that would be up to, the attorneys to talk about. Private development, private roads, makes a lot of sense. That's the best way to go forward, but you can't force that on a subdivision, unless we change our regulations and laws and
Of
everything.
course.
Okay, so, as far as the accepting existing roads that we're already plowing, it makes a lot of sense to do that, because once we accept another mile or so, or half a mile of roadway, it increases the funding, that we get from the state. Okay, so,
Chapter 9.
not by a huge amount, but it does help, okay? So if we do accept the roadway, we get more money. It would be ideal if we never have to take care of roadways ever again. Obviously, there's a cost, but the ones that are out there right now, it's in our interest to actually accept them as quick as we can, because there's a benefit to that. So, anyway, it is complicated, and I think if you wanna have a goal of looking at that issue as whatever, that's fine, but as far as actually having a goal to, eliminate all additional public roads, or something like that, that's kind of I don't know, I'm not sure how I feel about
It's
that.
a little undermined.
There's a
Well,
goal to
an
study it.
example is, right now, the town is extending Veterans Memorial Way. It's gonna be on town property, and the town will maintain it, will own the property, the whole deal.
Mhm.
So if you had that in place, when our subdivision, it gets approved by the planning board, I'm sorry, that's gonna be a private roadway. Well, it's a private roadway, but it's town-owned property,
Right.
and it's kinda, it would have to be, wouldn't apply, I guess, to anything that's town-owned or whatever, but,
Yeah, there'd be exceptions, but.
we'd have to.
And school buses do not, and are not allowed to go onto private property. They'd have to stop at the beginning of the road.
Yeah.
So if you got a big, huge subdivision, buses don't go into private subdivisions.
Joe or Brian or Amy, by way of clarification, call me naive when it comes to the developments, but if we had, I understand the concepts behind condominiums, but if we had another, say, R7 or residential zone where it would be private, hypothetically speaking, do we mandate that they have to be on town sewer? Would we actually allow any more septic systems to go in town, or do our current bylaws mandate they have to go on a town sewer and water?
They don't have to.
They don't have to. Okay.
But, I mean, most people, if it goes right near their property, want it.
Yeah,
but
it's like, why would I wanna buy a house?
But they don't have to.
Right.
And one big question would be is, you got an $800,000 home here on a private subdivision, across the street, which is a public road, is $800,000. This guy's gonna complain, why do I have to pay the same tax rate as this guy?
Yeah.
I want an abatement because I'm paying for my own trash pickup, I'm paying for my own snow plow, maintenance. I want an abatement, so the town, it's a tough proposition.
I understand.
Yeah.
But there are incentives. I mean, if a developer wants to do cluster zoning, like condominiums and stuff like that, they will come in and address that to the board, that we will keep this as
No.
a private.
No.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, sorry.
I don't think that was you, Joe.
Oh, and what did I say wrong?
Not how we typically talk to Joe, Aaron.
They'd have an HOA, and they would have.
Right, the zone 7, senior
Yeah,
villages,
they
stuff
would all
like that
have
can be
all
all
that.
private, they come in and they get, you know, and it's all presented that way,
Right,
and that's okay.
yeah.
But to force someone not to be able to accept the road, I think that'd be tough. I think the state would get involved in that too, wouldn't it, if you meet all the criteria of the town?
That's where the
Something to
attorneys-
think about.
It is something to think about. All right, next one.
These are helpful considerations. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The biggest overlying that is related to housing and economic development is very much related to circulation and facilities is this concept of neighborhoods and identifying whether they end up looking like neighborhood overlay districts or newly constructed districts. But you know, I gave out some of them, but treating those as different, differently when it comes to a little bit, not nearly as dense as our downtown, but a little bit denser housing than what's currently there. More and priority when it comes to adding and maintaining sidewalks and other walkability measures. The allowance of neighborhood retail establishments, and then eventually the connectivity by bike and bus between neighborhoods and connecting the neighborhoods to the downtown.
Is this a specific goal under?
They're in there, they're in the housing
Under
goals.
housing, okay.
Is there an
Yeah.
overlap, is there a
Okay.
question there?
I'll bring it up.
I mean, it's more like if the neighborhood concept is one that we can all get behind, then we can each, you know, there's housing goals related to, oh, our neighborhood capital N should have these things, and the circulation will say neighborhood capital N should be treated these ways.
And with different zoning in each neighborhood.
Yeah, it is certainly
Right.
applicable to land use and zoning.
Mhm.
Maybe there's even a, in each neighborhood, we should prioritize the implementation or the construction of new pocket parks. Or something, you know,
Mhm.
maybe there's some open space and rec overlap. Yeah, I'm looking for some thumbs
Yeah.
up, some agreement that is a concept. It's more radical than I think just a head nod. Although I'll take
Through the chair, 2 thumbs up. This has been a topic that has come up also in the Sustainability Committee.
Yeah.
We've been using different
Yeah.
language around it,
Yeah.
and we've really talked about it from denser development to increase walkability and to increase connectivity within the fabric of our community. You know, we're thinking of older populations as they go out of the big houses in these neighborhoods, and where can they live within our communities to stay connected with the services, to walk to the local parks, to walk to their, you know, convenience stores, to go to the senior center. That's really that's been coming up there, and I think a lot of the hesitancy that I've heard within our communities about the big apartment complexes and what that fits within the context of our community. And so we've had discussions about form-based code and how these neighborhoods can fit within the context. And I think there's I don't think it lives in sustainability. I think it does live better, arguably maybe in land use for some of those zoning changes that we're looking for, or housing for the type of housing that we're looking for. But it certainly is something that's been discussed heavily within our group.
Yeah, and I think to me, it's almost the overarching vision of what Franklin is gonna look like in 10 years. And then we decide, like, how do our goals fit that vision? That's how I started to think about it, because we have these overlapping goals. We have this vision. I think that this is what people have been talking about, what Consul Frangillo put together. He just put it on the map so we could see it.
Mhm.
And how we should be thinking, making our goals make this happen, right? And so but that's what I was just thinking right now while we were talking.
Ken?
Through the chair, 2 thumbs up on that. I wonder if maybe the point of us all coming together should be, okay, here are 5 humongous goals. And everything flows from all of those in our respective groups to make sure that, so that we've got some theme that kind of pulls this together.
A cohesiveness.
And maybe this is it, the map. I mean, here it is. Here is the strategic plan for the next 10 years. It's this map.
Right,
And
let's make it
everything
happen.
that subsets under this goes towards this as the vision. And then maybe that's what we really gotta focus in on. What are the pillars of, what are the pillars of Franklin, or, yeah, what are the pillars of Franklin over the next 10 years to achieve this?
Good, go.
Cool.
That's
How do we
different.
feel about the term, if we're gonna cite it in our various goals, how do we feel about the term neighborhood and sort of capital and neighborhood? The term that I was using for a while was village. People seem to prefer neighborhood, but I'm open to another term. Node. Centers.
Neighborhood.
I think neighborhood.
Neighborhood.
I don't know,
Yeah,
it is too
yeah.
futuristic.
So we already have a neighborhood commercial zone that we haven't been using, but our subcommittee has talked a lot about strengthening that and activating that so that it can pull these neighborhoods together.
Yeah, that's good.
Don't mean to chime in, but Brian, are these concepts that are best left as overlays and less of zones? Because zoning in particular, one of the major issues we've run into over the years is you're picking specific parcels that may or may not meet a zoning requirement, that may be reformatted to meet whatever zone you're talking about, whereas if we were to actually do more of an overlay, now we're talking about sections and less specific zone, less specific parcels, and more just a general thing, like by way of the theme is we have like medical marijuana overlay districts that basically overlap all of our industrial zoning in the town. So that's a zone that somebody can go into. It's not necessarily, it's not necessarily a zone per se. It's a zone that has multiple layers to it. So we could say, for instance, as Kobe's got it here, EDC, that's it, yeah, I don't have my glasses on. Let's say EDC.
Yeah. That's the Kennedy site. That might be the
Yeah.
ECDC.
So that, you could say,
early development,
childhood.
early childhood development.
right, we could say that the northern
So
the northern
if-
neighborhood overlay.
Yeah.
So, or but not necessarily be specific in regards to what parcels fit into that zone, but more of what area of the town fits into that zone. Is that?
Yeah, eventually you have to, at the end of the day, you are identifying parcels, whether it's an overlay or not, right? Like you're still drawing the line somewhere.
Right, but
Yeah.
by not delineating it, calling it a zone, you can actually put multiple overlays in one area.
But
Yeah.
I think what Janelle's point was, correct me if I'm wrong, Janelle, but that we have a neighborhood commercial zone that we don't use in the zoning table. It basically makes it almost impossible for people to do what it says we want them to do because it's too restrictive. And so it needs to be revamped so it's actually allows people to do what we want them to do, and we want them to be able to do it in these neighborhoods.
Right, exactly.
And I think
I think that's what she meant.
Yeah.
And I think by increasing density, you'll start to see, the dollars flow, because they'll see the
Right.
incentives that are associated with that and the increased housing stock.
Another note that we've talked about in land use and zoning, we've added a goal about Franklin character. And we have an objective in there of defining significant features in Franklin, like the edges, the center, the gateways, and I just added a note in there, and the neighborhoods,
Right.
right?
Which
So
one
that,
is that, by the way?
objective 6.2.
But those could be names for the neighborhoods too.
It's good to have some
But it's
architects
like
on
good
the
to
group.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think we all agree. Kobe's question was, are we all on board for this? And I think most of us, I feel we're pretty positive about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Surprised, but I like it. Yeah, and so, you know, in terms of the core concepts that are central to this that we're gonna keep coming back to, it's heavy focus on the importance of downtown and thus connectivity to the downtown. Heavy focus on 140, reestablishing as a fixed bus route and allowing for denser housing around the corridor, and then the establishment of slightly denser mixed-use neighborhood areas that are connected to the schools and working on connecting them to downtown.
Erin or Meg, you guys haven't had a chance to chime in yet? I wanted to give you guys an opportunity.
They don't have this map.
I personally love the concept. I'm really excited about it. I think just as far as sort of open space and recreation and natural, cultural, and historic resources, we would just be working, we can't change where our open space is, so I think it would just be how within these communities they can play in and help to support the communities. So it'd be more of a supportive role from objectives on our end, I think. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's an opportunity to like identify parcels to ensure a pocket park in each neighborhood, you know, if one doesn't already exist.
Yeah, and we certainly do have an objective around creating parks within each neighborhood in Franklin. So I think maybe just even within that specifically altering the wording on it to be a bit more supportive of this specific goal.
Yeah, it's definitely in there.
The other overlap, and really this comes when we start to message, because again, I think we're like underestimating how these aren't places that are used to a little bit of, or necessarily used to a little bit more density and business. But part of the sale of that is really saying, hey, if this is where we are encouraging things and where we're building our transit and our circulation around, we really want to minimize almost all other development, you know, elsewhere in the community, and encourage that we're efficiently putting it in places where we're now prioritizing our services. That's the real concept, and that's where we're saving, you know, pretty major open space, including private roadway restrictions to limit new sprawling subdivisions on the whole.
Yeah, and I guess too, where we're looking at, you know, some of our goals are looking at, where is it going with this? Come back to me, Kobe. I had a thought and I've just lost it.
No worries. Erin, did you want to chime in? No? Okay.
No, I'm just following along for now.
Very good. I didn't want to leave you out. Brian?
There's a lot here. The concept's great. There is a lot here, obviously. There's 3 of these neighborhoods, whatever it is you want to call them, are basically centered on educational focus, right?
Education resources.
Are they all going to have a non-residential component in addition, like commercial uses? So,
Like a mixed use type?
yeah, I mean, a small commercial center, if you will, a little neighborhood center, a few parcels, or are we going to have an overlay or an actual zone where those uses are allowed farther out and everything? And I think, so that's when you're identifying, do you have an overlay? Do you have a specific zone that these, so these things are, you know, I think that.
Can I translate that?
There's 3 of them that are really in single-family residential neighborhoods to begin with. And along the main roads in those areas, having a little bit of commercial uses is great. You want people in the neighborhoods to be able to come to those instead of going downtown. You want, and that's understandable. I think that.
Just like we have on Pond Street, Upper Pond Street.
Yeah.
We have the pizza place and
Yeah.
the convenience
No,
store.
exactly, and Lincoln Street is.
Lincoln does.
Yeah,
And
sure.
Lincoln.
Right. Daisy's.
I think that, like I said, the great concepts, the buy-in from the neighbors in those specific regions are going to be it's gonna be a lot of work, obviously. Putting it in the master plan is fine, but I would love to hear from the actual neighbors before going too far on it. But I mean, you know, introducing the concept at this point is fine, I think.
It's definitely something we can, go ahead, Joe. I was
The
just
three
gonna say-
parcels we were just talking about, Pond Street, Lincoln Street,
Yes,
Coles Tavern loosely.
those were there probably prior to 90% of the development that exists on that side of town right now. So when you buy into that, you accept what's there.
yep.
You don't go put a new store down on Dover Circle or a retail down there, it's not gonna work. I mean, the Pond Street guy's been there before I even was born, and I think it was about 5-10 years ago, the guy just went for a nice lukewarm beer and wine to satisfy that side of town.
Yep.
And the neighbors came out in droves, because now it's a change. I can only imagine what a retail store, convenience store, in those neighborhoods, the reaction they would have. As similar to when the land off Maple Street was up for sale, Bridle Path, the whole street was there, the planning board room was full. I probably lost my election because I voted to have that developed. I'm sure none of those people voted for me after that. And here we now spend $4 or $5 million to buy that land, and it was just a few weeks ago, a developer went in and wanted to put a couple houses at the end of that. They weren't so much concerned about the homes, he was willing to give a deeded access for people to park and enjoy that land. Neighbors weren't having it. So now that we own the land, they don't even want anybody to park down there or drive down their road to enjoy the land that we all bought. I can only imagine where this stuff is gonna flare up in the future.
Right, but
It's-
again, we
it's-
have to
it-
think long-term, big picture.
It sounds great, but
This is-
to go into a council or a planning board room, when it's standing room only, a lot of people won't vote for it. Especially in an election year. The
I'm
residents
gonna
will
vote for
win,
different people.
the residents will win.
Kobe.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is part of the conversation that I was expecting to have. I think a few things. One is, what's the sale? Well, we really have to, if we are identifying these districts, including our downtown, we have to make them priorities for services, for particularly walk and bikeability, particularly walkability, right? So that's, you know, the streetlights, the sidewalks are gonna be maintained first. We're gonna prioritize them in terms of finding parcels for parks. We're gonna prioritize them in terms of, you know, accessing, you know, bikeways from there and in the future buses. So that's the sort of trade-off. Yeah, you're accepting a little bit of neighborhood change, but we're adding a whole bunch of value to it. And partly, you know, so that there's that sort of with sugar, and then there's also we don't have a sustainable model right now, and we need to have a real conversation about how, like, Franklin can't exist as it currently stands. We are just going to slowly fall further and further behind our infrastructure liabilities unless we make major changes. And what do those changes have to look like? They have to look like a more efficient allocation of resources. You get the benefit of living next to one of our schools. That's going to come with some responsibility to be a part of our more efficient use of resources. That's all true. And one of the benefit and what an efficient use of resources means is that those places like Maple Hill, like Prospect, we can now justify better the not having those not become subdivisions, and then we get to preserve much more of the feel of Franklin as we know it, as opposed to saying, hands up, you can build anywhere, and we're going to chase you around town with our you know, infrastructure, and you're just going to keep seeing, you know, large swaths of land be torn down and change. So change is going to happen. We'd rather have it make sense, be resource efficient, be space efficient, and be efficient with our money.
Eric?
Yeah, I think it's a great point on like getting community buy-in to these, and I think we're not going to solve it here. We're not going to even solve it in this meeting. We're not going to solve it out of the master plan, and it's going to be a 10-year vision that's needing to have that dialogue. And I think how we communicate this is going to be really important. I think if anyone comes in and says we want to put a 7-Eleven onto that street, there's going to be opposition to it. But if we start talking about developing walkable retail area where people can ride their bikes to go get an ice cream with their kids, where they can walk to go have an outdoor alfresco dinner with their wife, you know, or partner. That's what our community, I think, will really gravitate towards. And if we create those spaces, then there'll be a lot more buy-in towards them occurring. But we do have to have that dialogue so that they understand what the vision is here.
I do believe in what he's saying, but more in the downtown area, not so much out in the single residential lots, where people buy into Franklin because of that. It's quiet, it's nice, it's nature, the deers walk through their backyard. That's the value of Franklin. That's why our real estate value is high. The more you start densing up those backwoods neighborhoods, they probably pay a lion's share of the property taxes. The homes are valued much more on the outskirts than the inside.
No, that's not true.
Residential is true.
It's not. Yeah, I think that's a real conversation that we need to have. We make way more money as a town in our internal parcels.
That's not what I said. Residential neighborhoods
Yeah,
versus small term closer to the downtown neighborhoods. There's no 1.2 million, 2.5 million homes in the downtown area, but they're on Prospect. They're up off of Highland Estates. They're all, what's the other ones down? The backwoods, the bigger lots with the bigger homes. They pay a lion's share of taxes.
yeah, they don't though when you
Because
have
you have a family of 2 or 3, and you have a family of 2 or 3 in a smaller lot, you're still gaining more tax revenue from the larger home than the smaller home. It pays more.
Yeah, but it costs a lot more to maintain that, right? That's that much more roadway that it takes to get to just you. That's that much more sewer that it takes to get to just you. It's that much more water that it takes to get to just you. It's that much more of our natural resources that we're giving up to service just you. On a per acre basis, on a per infrastructure basis, your downtown Cottage Street parcels are way better bang for the buck for a town. They're paying way more than they get back in service than even our 1.5 million on the edge of town.
I disagree because those neighborhoods might have 500 trips a day on the infrastructure, on the pavement, everything.
Okay.
And the Carter Street ones have 10,000 trips a day
Guys.
wearing it down. So I mean, we can go on and on and on.
Time out. Just, you're both right. Okay, no, let me clarify that. First of all, again, getting a little off track. I really want to stay focused on what specific cross questions we might have from the chairs to other chairs, just to try to get this ball rolling a little bit. But ultimately, our neighborhoods and the variety of different housing that we have, it's what actually adds to the value of the community as a whole. Like, some people come to this town because they work in the city and they want to sleep in Franklin, and they buy a house up on Lennox Drive. They don't want to be bothered by anybody during the day. They don't want to have, or during the night, whatever. They just really want to come home, go to sleep, do their stuff, and go back to work where they live. They don't want to have anything disturbing their neighborhoods. But there's also those who are minimalists who like to come to the town and live in the condos, the apartments, downtowns. They like to traverse the downtown. Most of the foot traffic, most of the commerce, and I shouldn't say most, but a fair share of the commerce is downtown, as well as on East and West Central Street. So to go and add, I guess the best way to put it is commercial aspects into the residential neighborhoods. A, it's going to get pushed back, and B, it's not really adding a lot of value to those neighborhoods without having a good plan and without having the neighbors buy into it. So that's where I think that's kind of where this whole thing is coming into play. Is okay, let's look at this from a holistic perspective. Do we want to say that Northeast Franklin is going to be X overlay, and we want to have these certain elements that go into that overlay, because the housing in that neighborhood would support it. You have to look at the current housing for the neighborhoods and say, what would it support in the future? Say even just 10 years from now. Most of the houses on Pond Street, most of the houses down that area are single-family, capes, federals, et cetera, branches. So what type of commercial or mixed use would fit in that specific neighborhood? But if you go up to Daniel Street and up to Lennox Drive, up on the hilly area, the house is a little bit bigger, you got a few what I like to call McMansions, a little bit quieter neighborhoods, a little more wooded neighborhoods. What's gonna fit that zone? What's gonna fit that overlay for that area? Not likely that we're gonna be throwing a small restaurant, Italian bistro or whatever up in that area of the neighborhood. So these are things that we have to think about based on what we currently have. I wouldn't say our downtown is any more or less valuable than our residential. They all play into it in some sense. So in regards to the discussion is concerned, is there any other specific questions you may have for your committee, for this committee tonight, your subcommittee? Because I want to give the other subcommittees an opportunity to ask similar questions that they may have.
Yeah, the other overlap was parking, but we can put a pin in that if you want to go to others.
That's kind of a across the board one. Janelle, did you have anything on your list specific to? I know on our cross-content items that we spoke about last week, there was parking, mixed-use zoning, downtown district zone, potentially no requirements for the MBTA community, et cetera, did we get any questions that you had in regards to that specifically answered last week?
Other than parking?
Yeah.
I think last week's discussion was good, and going through this exercise of throwing all the goals out there and identifying where their overlaps are was really helpful. One of the things, we left the sustainability section from 2013 into our list of goals because we thought there are sustainability related goals that are very relevant to land use and zoning. But again, just wanted to make sure if other groups are talking about these things, where should it live? Should we at least cross-reference? The objectives we had in here, are we working on recommending a right to farm policy or bylaw? Are there bylaws related to deforestation? And this overlaps with open space and sustainability. Land use for renewables. And are there provisions in the zoning bylaws for EV parking and charging? We define things like where gas stations can be. Are we also defining where EV charging centers and stations can be? So these are some of the things that we outlined that have overlaps, and we just want to make sure we're consistent with the other groups. No like hard specific questions, but if people have comments about these things, we're all ears.
Can you go one by one? Is that
Eric, in sustainability, guys, do you have anyone from sustainability or?
I have comments on sustainability, but not necessarily to Janelle's
Okay.
comments.
Yeah, and Gino's on our subcommittee, so we've been doing a little bit of checking and cross-referencing
Okay.
ourselves.
So you've been able to, good.
And then in Franklin Character, we have an objective to establish a historic district. And I know, Meg, you flagged that overlaps with your subcommittee.
Yeah.
And then we have an objective to establish tree canopy guidelines and protect trees of a certain diameter. So these are things that overlap with open space as well. But I didn't see that specific in your list, Meg.
We do have an actual tree bylaw. Objective 4.4 is to create a tree bylaw to ensure the protection and preservation of trees through demolition and construction on residential, commercial, industrial, raw land, and special use land. So maybe that's something that we can sort of collaborate and find a wording that best suits both, because I think that would be,
Right.
I think, again, you know, same to similar points, it'd be fine to have in both, but I feel like this specific point would be good to be consistent with wording on.
Yep,
Mhm.
exactly.
Through the chair, related to that, the concept that came up in the sustainability group was a slight tilt to it, where we weren't looking at focusing on existing trees and preservation of those trees, but how can we increase the number of trees, say in our downtown areas, to help minimize the heat islanding effect that's within our community. So I don't know, I'm open to ideas on whether those two concepts are distinct enough and should live in different chapters, or if there's value in having them combined into one.
So Eric, we do have an open space that has a separate objective, because we're looking at, we put that combined with looking at thoughtful design of parks and playgrounds to include shade trees and plant additional trees to meet the need for shaded areas. But we can certainly also look at specific wording on adding into heat islands throughout the community in there as well. But we've tied that in with maintaining our Tree City USA status and that with that objective.
That's great, and that maybe just tick one off of Amy's list there. So I like that idea of combining them, and I welcome other people's input from the Sustainability Committee, but I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Joe?
Would that be just for town-owned land or for private land?
Good question.
All lands, right?
So if we had a 10-15 acre beautiful industrial parcel that could bring in some extreme revenue to the town, but they couldn't build it because they can't cut down trees? Am I hearing it that right? Am I hearing that the right way?
No, so Joe, I think that would go back to the tree bylaw, and I think that will just be how the different groups who are then pulling together the actual tree bylaw, what wording goes into that. So it wouldn't be for specific development, you can't cut down trees, but it needs to be, I guess however they want to word that, to look at the best overall impact on the environment. So whether there were specific guidelines on replication or restoration of specific areas, if you're cutting X amount down, looking at different percentages based on specific areas that they're in. I think there will be a lot of work that will go into that and what that looks like, but I think the intent of writing one to have the tree bylaw, so there's actual guidance that'll look at things not only residential properties, but commercial properties, that'll look at solar arrays, and there just needs to be clear guidelines so that we're doing our best for development for the town and while preserving our environment and protecting our resources.
I mean, I agree with that, but I think that would be the death of our commercial industrial development.
It's also not.
And we need that
it's-
revenue.
Joe, I agree with you, but it's also not written.
No, I'm just saying, but
This-
once something starts to take a foothold and it runs, it's hard to stop the train.
Amy?
Yeah, I think it's just the fact that we have nothing in place
Right.
right now, of tree clearing, of redevelopment, of putting in additional trees.
Right,
And
even a 1-for-1, if you take one down, you need to plant someplace else.
Yeah, and I think the goal is to develop something that, yes, you can still develop. However, we still do want, if you can maintain the trees. I mean, they've knocked out trees and replanted them at the same spot. To try not to do that, to try to preserve the existing ones that can still be there and do your development at the same time. It's just, we
Yeah.
just don't have anything in place. And I think the goal is to, with each of these subcommittees, is to try to get something in place.
Right, that happened on
That
Pond
still
Street.
allows development.
Yeah, that happened on
But don't we
Pond
have any
Street.
bylaws that are in effect right now that any development industrial over 25,000 square feet, special permit, and that would take care of, well, if you're gonna cut that, we need some over here.
It,
I mean,
it
don't we
doesn't
have,
say it in the special permit. I mean, it's a special permit, but
Well, we
there's
all
not a
know, but-
regulation.
but we all know by special permit, you can get things done.
Kobe?
Yeah, I guess maybe not for political feasibility, but for like sake of speaking candidly, I'm willing to be a little, yes, what's being called for right now is just let's have a conversation around a tree bylaw, and I stand by that. And, but you know, on a personal point, I would strengthen that as much as we can. Again, we only have so much land in Franklin, and we've developed a whole lot of it. And there's a whole bunch that could much more efficiently be used, right? We could revisit the same industrial parks and still fit in more before knocking down new forests. And placing a strong priority, a strong priority on that is key. I mean, we still have abandoned lots. We still have, I would way rather see those be developed first than us knocking down new open space. I think that's part of the goal.
It's worth,
You will see landowners
Everyone
though,
has
coming in, coming in for abatements.
1 second. Aaron, you
Just
had
here
your
to
hand
say
up?
I'm
Go ahead.
seconding Kobe there.
Okay.
Yeah, fully support that idea.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Joe.
I was just saying, you'll have, you know, any large land that's left for development. If you get 10 acres and now you can only develop 5, you're gonna have landowners coming in for abatements and reducing the taxes on the property. And going for an override, nothing makes sense to me here tonight. We need money. And we need money to do anything that's on this map. And to limit development is not gonna help.
Yep. Yeah, we're getting a little off track. Let's.
I think that is the bulk of it. I wanna have that conversation though.
Go, well, it's
Not master plan.
it's an overarching discussion that best fits under economic development.
I think it's the ultimate core of what we do, is we have 26 square acres. How do we get enough income from that acreage in order to pay for the services that people want in that area? That is the core of a master plan, and we need to be having a conversation about what brings in money and what costs us money. And yeah, I don't want to run away from that.
That's okay.
No, it's the same topic, but really tied in with the master plan for, we have, and maybe I don't know if it got into the combined spreadsheet, because we sort of had it extra wording off to the side where we were noodling on language that would go in it, or, you know, getting towards implementation. But so much of what we've been talking about in land use and zoning, with our whole team, our whole group, is focusing on can we increase density in already developed sites so that we can preserve open space? And so what kinds of adjustments can we make and recommendations can we make to get us there? So that's been, a lot of our goals and objectives are around that. And we have it sort of written. We didn't make that specific, but maybe we can, a goal. But it's sort of in all of it. When we're talking about promoting mixed use and encouraging development of diverse housing and expansion, retention of current businesses and attraction of new businesses in appropriate locations, then it's all like in developed sites and in densified strategic areas.
Which specific goal or objective is that?
I mean, I guess goal 5 is where we get at, you know, preserving and enhancing existing unprotected, natural, and open. There's sort of a side comment that's like, sort of like, see above, that's why we're densifying, right?
Mhm.
That's why we're suggesting all of these other changes. And if we should make it more explicit in land use and zoning, we can do that. You know, sort of this encourage redevelopment versus new development of a virgin site, maybe that's just its own goal. It needs to be out there if it's not clear enough from the conversations that have been had.
No, I like that.
It's not that we want to limit development, we want to
encourage
We wanna
redevelopment
encourage
of
it.
existing resources.
Right, exactly. And we heard that at the, you know, there was comments in the open house. So it feels like that a lot of people are aligned around this. It just
Mhm.
needs to be directed in the right way.
No, I think that should be its own goal, or part of one of these goals. Say, that could be 5-1.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just rewording five
Right.
to capture it. But, which, there was a little like editorialism in the goals. Like there's, like they would be like more than just a goal, they'd be like, do this because of this. But I think we have some ability to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I like
And-
it. Yeah, no.
And from the sustainability, this was one of the topics I wanted to discuss as well, because we've had a lot of conversation about the ecosystem benefits, the ecosystem services that undeveloped land provides, including as storms increase and the severity of those storms increase, how those areas contain and filtrate water, and that by preserving those open spaces, we save the town money in stormwater management. And I think highlighting I don't think that lives best within sustainability. I think it lives best within the open space and land use. But I think it's really important for us to call out these ecosystem services that the lands provide is an additional benefit to Kobe's ideas here, that's another value that's added here.
Just out of curiosity, Janelle, the one map that you have right here with the red part kind of scratched off, is that Shaw's, right in front of Shaw's right there? That's the picture?
Yep.
What's the red represent?
That's showing potential space of that's an underutilized parking lot that
Mhm.
shows potential for development.
Yeah,
Sure does.
it's funny, that actually happens to be where the Horace Mann monument is, along that stretch, you've got flagpoles and stuff right there, cause that used to be his house, right there, on that parcel of land. You know, it's interesting, cause as I look at those parcels, and I don't know the back history too much behind it, but I did spend some time at the Historical Museum, reading up on a few of these things, is that used to be like a grounds, like a park grounds where people used to go and, you know, have their festivities and other stuff like that. And that's actually where Horace Mann's house was. So what I find rather ironic is we're sitting here tonight talking about future master plans and goals and where we wanna see things developed or potentially be developed in the future. I can't imagine that back when that was a farm and people were proposing to put in that parking plaza right there, that they were like, yeah, great idea. Let's take this beautiful farm where one of our founders of the town lives and turn it into a shopping plaza. I'm sure people in the neighborhoods weren't like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. No, I'm sure they weren't, and that's kind of similar pushback we're gonna get when we start proposing any future development in other areas of the town as well. There's just not any more room left to do such an extensive project. But this is a great idea on taking what is already an existing lot and repurposing it for better use. I mean, no insult to the businesses or the buildings in Shaw's Plaza, but they're a little dated. We could definitely take and do something or promote something that would incentivize them to add
He's got the right to do
more
that now.
development to that location. What's that?
He's got the right to do that now, it's a commercial zone. He could build that right now.
They could, if we had some kind of incentive to do it, right? Isn't that really what this boils down to, is what's the incentive?
Incentives, or how do we take away disincentives? Like, how do we take away restrictions?
Or in other words, what's restricting them from doing it now?
There isn't any.
Yeah, I mean, there is though, right? It's setback policies,
No,
it's parking
I'll tell you what
policies.
I'll tell you what the issue would be. It's an existing site that does not conform to stormwater regulations.
Stormwater.
So that new building would have to upgrade the whole property, millions of dollars of underground drainage, building infrastructure, and then you look at it and go, doesn't pay off. Just keep running. That's the problem.
Certainly there is a project that pays off. right?
Yeah, it's a good discussion.
It's all about
Definitely.
development.
All right.
Glenn, I
think-
just want to note real quick
Yes.
that these sketched on plans and
Yeah,
images go to, the credit goes to Jen Williams while we were all talking.
I know, Jen couldn't make it tonight.
Yeah,
That's
but
unfortunate.
we had a great meeting, and as we were talking, she was just dropping in screenshots, and we were sketching on things, so.
No, it's good. I like it.
Good to
Well
hear.
done. I think definitely adding that in as one of your goals.
I
I think it's a great idea to.
I
add.
think goal one, because then the others
Just
follow
kinda
it.
Fall in suit with it. Yep. Excellent. Good, Kobe. I was gonna throw it out to, hold on, do you know anything specific?
It was more to respond to one
Sure.
of her questions. Yeah, the EVs is a weird one. It feels like the sustainability committee would tackle that
Yeah.
more than land use and zoning, particularly around like natural
There's
and
a
open
couple
space.
overlap on that
That
one.
doesn't feel like the natural
Yeah.
open space thing.
Oh,
It should be
right.
addressed in our, but
Yeah.
it just feels weird from a standpoint. And then in terms of like, yeah, I don't know, because our sustainability is, I mean, it's tackling some climate policies, some distributed generation.
I mean, we have
Feels
convert fleet to EVs, but we don't, and add public charging stations.
Yeah, okay.
But we don't say like where they should be, or if we don't allow gas stations anymore, and that's the kind of things that I heard Janelle ask,
Yeah.
like where they should be, and that sort of stuff. So, I think basically we're like going, well, that's like, do we dictate where it is, or does land use
Oh, okay.
figure out
Mhm.
where it should be? But we want to encourage it. and
Why would it
add
radically
Yeah.
differ from
I don't know.
gas stations?
So I think how it
No.
came up, we realized that like this is something that needs to be considered with development, but also as a building use type. And the objective landed in our sustainability goal, which is really not just, it's about open space, right? So we do have an objective down below about improving bylaws with definitions with missing or unclear building use types, and we can add EV charging to that.
This is one
Right?
area.
This is
This is
right.
one area where I think it may make sense for that particular item to live within sustainability. And
Yeah.
that way, if anybody's looking for what should the community do for EV, it all goes to one place. And so if it's looking for where a public charging station should go, it's in there, because it's not a zoning thing, right? You know, they can go wherever.
Right.
It's more of an incentivization and making businesses aware of the state efforts to install public charging within those. We're not looking at creating and turning the local BP into a EV charging station. We want them where the businesses are so that people can go and buy things. Likewise,
Right, we
it doesn't
mentioned,
necessarily.
we mentioned the parking downtown,
Right.
like to get to, in the municipal lot, to get EV chargers there, so people could go down, charge their car, walk around downtown.
Agree. And I think, you know, there could be an argument that facilities might have something as far as, you know, what the municipality should do for
Right.
their own fleet and
That's-
and,
but
and
that's
the
specific-
schools and the
right.
EVs. It just let it
That's-
all
It's
live
also
in
like
one.
specific
infrastructure
municipal.
and all kinds of other things.
Let it all live in one.
Yeah, no, I see what, I definitely see what Eric's saying. I agree with the sustainability. I think with the land use or zoning is trying to get the private developments that come in, to encourage the private developments. And the planning board has asked before, can you guys install so many charging stations when you come in with multifamily developments, or you come in with large industrial building? Although a lot of them make up their own minds and end up lately been doing it on themselves.
anyway.
Okay.
So I guess
So-
it's making a decision of keeping it all in sustainability.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to go to planning or zoning, because it's, I think they're gonna get out of those new developments anyways.
Mhm.
So I agree with what Eric's saying.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Janelle, for updating that. Shoot, this is fun. Excellent. Janelle, do you have any more specific questions you wanted to address?
I'm skimming. Next meeting, we'll touch on the overlaps with housing and economic development. We are proposing adding residential to the mixed business innovation to help activate Clark Cutler, and then in natural and cultural historic resources, there was a comment about artist housing.
Mm-hmm.
So we are proposing that zone gets expanded to include that. And then along with that, we are proposing this new MBI zone get overlaid on the crossing, so that things like the mill store and that area can sort of live in this and promote that type of work. But this was us playing with a map,
So I'll
different.
also respond in email about some of this.
Okay. Different colors, because we were playing with the actual zone colors, but similar. We have a similar map that's all colored up by zones. That we've made a lot of recommendations for how to meet some of these goals, but with zoning changes.
Can you make that publicly? Can you share that within the drive?
Yep. And then one other thing that it's probably worth talking through with everybody, this section on the Goal 6 guidelines on Franklin character. It's provide guidelines on Franklin character and develop a more thorough review process. So we have developed form-based codes in certain parts of town where it makes sense. And there's a link to sort of what form-based codes are. And there's a link to Norfolk's B1, which Gino has commented that he likes. It's not perfect, but it's a good reference. We already talked about defining areas of Franklin, establishing a historic district. So we'll want to make sure the language is consistent with natural, cultural, historic resources. Tree guidelines we talked about. Elevate design review commission to an approving board. So if we want to have a character that's defined, we sort of want a more thorough review process around that character.
Is that legal? Do we know if that's
Well, you
legal?
can make something like that legal. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a process. you know.
It's a process.
And then requiring limited site plan approval for use or reuse of a site. So this could serve as a tool to improve a property or building, even if it's not changing its use, it still needs that site plan review.
Well, we do have that, there's a minimum size change on a lot. Is it 600? I can't remember, square feet.
600.
That kicks in, so if it's only 100 square feet of your parking lot you're changing, you don't necessarily have to come in for a site plan review.
Yeah.
But if it's
Between
a larger,
600 to
yeah,
5,000
if it's a larger
is
size.
limited site
yeah.
plan.
We have that in place, so if there are,
We do.
changes necessary, of course, that's fine.
Yeah, that enacted, we used to have a bylaw that was in the use or reuse of a property. So if it was sold
Yeah.
and somebody took over a rundown building,
Mm-hmm.
they'd have to come in for a new limited site plan with change of use, reuse. And it was a chance for everybody to say, hey, can you fix that fence? Can you put some shrubs in?
Yeah.
Can you paint the building?
Do something.
But now, we don't have to do nothing. We just go right in and just
Yeah.
do absolutely zero.
So it's not like it needs.
Doesn't improve the neighborhood.
It's
That's
not
not-
like it needs to go back through tech review or anything.
No, they have to come in through a whole site plan to do that,
If less than.
Not a use or reuse.
for reuse. Yeah.
If
If
they're
it's the same,
changing-
if it's the same use, there is no regulation. So you're saying if they come, if it's the same use and it's resold, you want them to come in for a limited site plan?
Well, even if there's a change of use, if the change
The
of
change
use.
of use is already in place.
If you go from a retail to a restaurant,
That's a
Yeah.
reuse.
that's a change of use.
Change
They
of
come
use.
But
in
if it's
for-
zoned for that legally without a special permit or anything, you could just go in and do it, correct?
No.
Why can't you just get a building permit to renovate the building the way you want? If it's zoned without any type of a special, it's zoned for that use, why do you have to go to the planning board? It's as of right.
It's really to notify the neighbors and let the opportunity between Board of Health and Building Commissioner to come. They may not file any permits, they may just come in and try to do it. So it's really to notify everybody around them that there is a change in use in the property and to make sure they conform to stormwater.
But that's if they make an
everything
increase of
else.
over 600 square feet.
Yes.
So if they don't change anything.
No, change of
And
use.
it's the 600 feet is external, not internal.
So that's separate. Change of use completely, just a change of use with no square feet requires a site plan. 600 feet to 5,000 is a
I don't think
limited.
that's true. Unless you kick in a 600 square foot, like you're putting an addition on or changing. If it's just an existing use, because there are stores all around town that change all the time, uptown, everywhere.
They're the same use.
And they never come, no, I've seen, an accounting firm turn into a dress shop. Total change of use, none of that stuff ever comes back. Never, never, never.
All set?
Yeah.
Kobe?
Yeah, so this is fun, and again, I'm jealous of your committee. I think it's starting to get into the weeds of how we meet some of our needs, and I'm worried about it being contradictory at times, or just making sure that we're not. If we're saying, okay, we want to be way stricter on, new developments in new places that are knocking down open space, and we want to be stricter on design, then we fairly dramatically want to relieve or make easier your ability to redevelop parcels. I like that you have goal 7, which seems to be, streamlining the permitting processes and how do we avoid special permit processes and minimize time.
Right.
Adding restrictions around use and reuse, like, I don't know. I don't think I want to trigger whether it is right now, just like from a high standpoint, like when the barber shop became a whatever Greco design shop. That's a reuse. I don't want them to have to think twice about that. I don't want to put any roadblocks in their way. We're struggling enough as it is to fill those spaces. What's the thought of like adding a further roadblock?
What if you get an old gas station and they just change it from a mobile to a Sunoco, and they gotta come up with design review for the signage, and they just keep the old rundown gas station there in the center of town and it never gets improved?
They can do that.
They can do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying, they can do that.
Yeah, I think we have to be somewhat okay with that. Like, that's better than it not happening in the first place. Yeah, that like I'd rather see a new gas station come in than it just become an abandoned gas station. And
No, I'm
so
saying
I'm
if they
not
just-
interested in putting.
I'm saying if they keep the same rundown gas station and just change the sign and do nothing to the property.
Yeah, well, they're changing ownership, same use, that's fine. I mean,
Yeah. And
Well, that's fine right now.
But
Why-
it's
why-
their property though, I don't
Then
know.
we just leave
If-
everything the
If
way
you
it
don't
is,
fix
that's
it
all.
up, then we probably have less customers coming, it's your own fault, right? But for us to have to force people to do it,
I'm done,
I
I'm
don't
done
know.
making comments at this point.
The other thought that
Dave,
was
well,
Go ahead.
excuse me for 1 second. Along the lines of use and reuse and limited site plans, in the code classes I teach, there's pre-existing non-conforming. And for residential properties and anything like that, you don't need to bring a building up to code if it's pre-existing non-conforming. And why? Because it's a tremendous expense to bring any building up to code. My house in particular has knob and tube wiring, and I don't care. It still works. It ain't broken, why fix it? Many people would argue with that, saying, well, hey, it's an outdated wiring system, it should be replaced with something that's more modern. And I would argue, all right, you got the money for me to replace it. But, on the other hand, to Joe's point, if we're gonna allow a dilapidated gas station, by way of Joe's example, to allow itself to continue to stay dilapidated, it just ultimately brings down the value of the adjacent properties and therefore doesn't really promote any future, economic growth. And that's really that, because commercial and residential properties in the downtown specifically have impacts on each other. If you have a dilapidated house next to a nice house, it doesn't add to the value of the dilapidated house, it actually takes away from the nice house next to it. It doesn't work the other way. So we wanna be able to at least allow the option that if a building or site, whatever, goes up for use or reuse, that we at least have an opportunity to go in and say, okay, is there something that we could say or ask the current or potential reuse person to make the change to this, at least just aesthetically, to try to improve.
I see what people are saying to me means like kind of like a blight bylaw, like we don't want blight, right? Nobody wants blight, but we can't force people to fix something, but if it's abandoned and it's maybe it's that.
Too much
I'm not talking about going to that full extent.
Right.
But to ensure that the parking lines are striped, there's a handicap spot accessible that
it's
hasn't
a-
been there in
it's an
20
aesthetic.
years.
Safety.
Gets back to the
Yeah,
character.
safety stuff, and try to
Yeah.
make
Right.
the property comply a little bit more to our regulations.
Just goes back to the
Amy?
character.
Go ahead.
I think it just gets back to the character. I think we're getting into a little bit too deep. We're not gonna define each wording of a zoning bylaw and a master plan. So we're getting a little too deep with this, but, it could be something to be considered on the character, defining the character of the town, defining where, the town would like to see things, and so much on each little permit that it has to go through. So I really wouldn't go that direction.
Colby?
Related to that, I mean, there are examples of like inventories of underutilized properties and even fees on underutilized properties, so like get at blight more effectively. I do like the market is really, really good at encouraging you to get the maximum use of if we just like get out of their way. And we often, in hopes of trying to get a better result, just add further expenses and hurdles that just get in the way of progress of property. So that's what I'm cautioning against. On the design standpoint, I think conceptually strengthening our design standards is something that we're all in agreement, or whatever, that we're loosely in agreement with, and the idea of moving toward form-based code would be part of that. I do want to make sure that it doesn't then become that we don't just like introduce a new tool for slowing down or delaying property. So it's just that if we're giving a new power to slow down, that we're doing so in a very narrowly tailored way. So strengthening design, or strengthening the power of the review board, great. If we also heavily restrict like what they're commenting on and what they can say no to, and make it clearer, because otherwise it just becomes a neighborhood fight over every single project about colors.
It does. I agree. Look, we're getting a little off topic, but when people, one of my biggest issues is when somebody pulls a housing inspection and the house inspector comes in for the seller or the buyer, whomever, and they're walking through the house and they're looking around, pointing out things that need improvement according to some odd standard that they've learned in their trade, but not actually specifically addressing it from a code perspective. They're unenforceable suggestions. So unless you're gonna have somebody come in and actually take out the code book and say, okay, that's a code violation, that's a code violation, that's a code violation, and actually cite code, most things are fairly unenforceable unless they have something specific to reference to. So in regards to Joe's point, is like the gas station or a piece of property that's kind of gone beyond current code standards to the point where it's become a safety hazard, or it's a blight issue, or if it's just downright aesthetically unpleasing, we should have at least the means or the ability to go in and have Gus, the building commissioner, the electrical inspector, or somebody go in and kind of just take a walk through the building and say, okay, all right, this might work in an old residential house, but it doesn't work in a commercial building that gets used for these purposes, and at least allow us to do a safety check. I like to call it more of a safety check.
Where would that fit in the master plan?
Under the required limited site plan approval for use and reuse. Joe?
I'm gonna go off topic here for just a second, but there must be a
Okay.
different set of rules for Joe Allegan. Because a month ago, 2 months ago, I pulled a hot water heater for a home that's been in existence for 50 years,
Yeah.
trouble-free. And the plumbing inspector came down and started walking around and made me change plumbing that he approved 30 years ago. It cost me $25,000 in extra plumbing to replace a hot water heater because he noticed that's not by code, I'm not gonna sign this house off until it's all fixed. So for a simple hot water heater, it cost me $25,000. Wouldn't sign off.
Aren't you
So don't-
advocating for more of that?
Hmm?
Aren't you advocating for more?
No,
of
I'm just saying there's a
that
different set of rules
practice?
for me. Everybody else is different. I'm just saying, I'm just talking about what, tapping off what he was just talking about.
Yeah, what a
Yeah.
tremendous perspective to bring into like, oh yeah, those are things that actually slow down
Right.
our development practices. Why would we be advocating for more such tools?
Janelle?
Again, it feels like this is a really good conversation and we're too much in the weeds at
I
the same
think what
time,
it is
but
everyone's getting
yeah.
tired, so we're just.
yeah,
kinda
I
saying-
Glenn,
we
you
can-
mentioned the existing non-conforming.
Yeah.
I mean, could we do something like, if you take on a property and you do pull permits for more than a third of the assessed value of the property, now you are responsible to bring it up to current codes and character standards.
I think there's something like that already in play, isn't it, Brian?
Well, I don't think the master plan is here to write zoning regulations, it's here to set goals on to direct what you would like to see written, but zoning changes should not be written in the master plan.
Yeah.
It should just be more of the concepts and the goals and the objectives of it. So I wouldn't focus on getting the zoning written.
Yeah.
That's up to staff. to-
Just for the record, when a new business comes in, whether it's replacing another business, there is a process in town where they get sign off from different departments and if there is a known issue by the building commissioner or whatever, they address them. If it is, like you're saying, going from an existing gas station to a new owner, those are more difficult, but they do get signed off on it anyway. But they go by our bylaws. If we want to increase the process, you wanna change the process that we already have to do this, then that's fine. We have our online permitting, that people put in a building permit, everybody goes through the reviews, that, if somebody's coming in and they are gonna quietly do something, they usually get found out, and, the building commissioner goes out and talks to them and says, no, you have to file for this permit and this permit and this permit. So as far as site plan review, though, we do have it specifically in our zoning bylaw that if the changes on site are more than a certain size, they need to have a site plan approval. So, and the change of use, which Amy mentioned also, is a site plan unless they have a good site plan in place, which case I've seen Gus say, no, you don't need one a couple of times, but whether or not that's, so, anyway. So, it is all issues we deal with all the time, and if there's specifics that you want us to address, we'll sit down and talk about them, and, be happy to, anytime, so, I don't know. We'll have to look at, I'm gonna be going through all of your, proposed goals and objectives. I think I have Friday I was gonna take the day off, but actually I'm gonna be sitting in Boston for several hours. I think I'll just be reading those. And you're gonna end up with a lot of, and I just kind of thumbed through them, and I didn't even know the circulation of the facilities in there and things, but there's a lot of crossover. The way we dealt with it last year in 2013 was to say, see housing goal 5,
Right.
objective 3.
Right.
Instead of restating everything, it is one of your put it in there as a goal, put it in there as an objective, and then refer to the other sections that have the same issues. And it usually works pretty well, but there's a lot of that in here, no doubt about it.
Well, I look forward to your review of the document,
Oh,
and any
yeah.
notes that you might wanna put in there as you spend your time in the city. Ken?
Mr. Chair, if I may suggest, these are conversations that sound like they'd be really good over a beverage watching the Celtics right now. My second point, I'm gonna go into the weeds literally and figuratively and off topic for a brief moment. Maria Popova said that without flowers, there is no us. There is no music, there's no science, there's no poetry. I give you some poetry because today is National Bring Flowers to Someone Day. I bring flowers to all of you for the work you do, the compassion, and the enthusiasm that we have, that we can be wonky people for hours talking about these sorts of things. And I commend to you all, here's the flower that I give to you. Write it down, Bloom by Emily Dickinson. It is an incredible piece. It ends with this notion that to be a flower is profound responsibility. And I'm gonna motion to adjourn.
Hold on, I can't move on to 3 yet.
I gotta run.
With that being said, we'll get to adjourning in just a second. I didn't wanna leave Meg or Aaron out in any context, because they're online. I know you've been listening intently. Are you guys okay with kinda carrying any questions or topics or on to the 29th meeting?
Yeah, works for me.
Or if anybody has anything specific that you feel you need addressed prior to the 29th, is to either email the appropriate chairs, or when, again, just kind of CC myself and Amy, or direct it towards Brian and Amy, wherever you feel your best answers may be resolved from. A lot of times it's best done kind of outside of the meeting. What I would ask everyone to do, who's still here, is to go and look, just like Brian's going to on Friday, through all the goals and objectives from each element, and formulate or come up with any questions you may have that we can also have answered between now and the 29th. So there's a lot of work to do over the next couple of weeks. But I'm excited. This is a great start. Amy, you're going to take and consolidate. What were you going to do with the?
I'm gonna try to I was gonna consolidate, but if people are gonna go back and make comments to the spreadsheet, then I shouldn't consolidate, but I do wanna try to reach out. I'm gonna start with a few of the specific things that I've noticed to the subcommittee chairs, to kinda ask for some response from, and then, I think, as Brian said, you guys may just need to put in the next column saying, this is a duplicate from this.
Right.
And then
That would be
we'll
easier.
work on that.
Okay. So everyone's got some homework to do. Awesome. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. I think Ken's already said it, even though he's left.
So moved.
Need a second? Yeah, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Roll call.
Roll call vote. Meg?
Yes.
Janelle?
yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Ken had to leave. Clerk, yes. Vice Chair?
Yeah.
Chair?
Yes.
8-0.
Excellent.
You
Aye.
forgot me, but I.
Oh, sorry, Erin. I'm going through the list, Erin.
No worries. I
Okay.
think I come after Eric, and that gets confusing, and
Did she
I
say
totally
yes?
understand. But
I've been called Aaron
Did she
before.
say
that.
yes?
I didn't say yes.
She did say that yes or no.
Did you say yes, Erin?
of course I did. I'm not in here to cause debate.
All
It's
right.
not debatable.
Not open for debate anyways. All right. Good job, everybody. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Recording